Hello, and welcome to Embrace the Darkness, Episode 1. This week, I'm joined by Dark Sky's Dan Oakley, founder and director of Darkscape Consulting and chair of the Dark Sky Places Committee, which advises the board of Dark Sky International, the body for designating international dark sky reserves. Prior to founding his own consultancy, Dan was a lead ranger with the South Downs National Park Authority, and in 2016, was the driving force for the national park achieving its international dark sky designation. Funny and hugely knowledgeable, Dan is now taking his enthusiasm and passion for the night sky to other parts of the world, advising and supporting other landscapes and destinations on becoming dark sky places by improving their night skies. I joined Dan in Queen Elizabeth Country Park to talk about the national park's journey and what each of us can do to continue to improve our dark night skies. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dan. Hello and good evening, and welcome to the Embrace the Darkness podcast. I'm here this evening with the lovely Dan Oakley.
Hello.
And Dan was a former Dark Skies officer for the South Downs National Park, and he was absolutely instrumental in getting us designated as an international dark sky reserve. And he is now director of an organisation called Darkscape Consulting. So, hello Dan.
Hello.
Hello, great. Thanks so much for coming along.
It's lovely, yeah, nice to be outside and taking a walk and a stroll and having a chat about dark skies.
Yeah, so this evening we are in Queen Elizabeth Country Park, which is just across from Butser Hill, which is one of our dark sky discovery sites, and maybe we'll chat about that a bit later. But first of all, Dan, tell us about how you got involved in being out under dark skies.
Oh, well, there's a story. Okay, so I will go back to the 80s.
Okay.
And when fluorescent clothing was all its rage. So I was camping in France with my parents, and we were in a little town just outside of a city called Dijon. And I remember at the time I was reading The Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. I think I was only about 15 or 16 at the time. And my dad took me down to the river and just said, okay, let's have a look at some stars. So we laid down on the banks of this tiny little river in France and looked up. And there I saw the Milky Way. And he had a pair of binoculars, and we looked at the binoculars, and I remember seeing thousands of stars that I'd never seen before. And that was the first time I saw the Milky Way, and it's the first time, and probably the only time in my life, where I've actually had a sensation of the scale of the galaxy. It's one of those really kind of rare moments where you suddenly, like not an epiphany, but just kind of like a wow, we're in this big place. But I've never had it since, unfortunately. But I remember that moment, and I always tell people, you always remember the first time you saw the Milky Way, because you remember where you were, you remember what were you doing and what the smells were like and what you were wearing. So I was wearing hideous, the 80s clothing. I remember it was warm, and so that was my first introduction to dark skies. And funny enough, I was at my sister's wedding anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and I met my auntie, and she was saying, how are you doing with your job? And she said, the first time she saw the Milky Way was in France at that river at the same campsite. So it was just a bit of a weird kind of loop around, circle of life kind of thing, that she kind of said the same experience that I have. And it's great when I do the talks and do some of the outreach we do with the South Downs, is that when I tell people that, everybody smiles and everybody remembers their first time. And it always will. What was yours?
First time seeing the Milky Way, again, yeah, was a child. We lived in rural Wiltshire, and I remember my dad taking us outside and seeing this incredible bright stars across the sky moment. But it's always special to see the Milky Way this time of year. I look for Cassiopeia, the big W, and wait for my eyes to adjust, and then might get to see it. So so the Milky Way is actually quite special for South Downs, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Milky Way is really special because it's our home, basically. It's the galaxy that we live in, and you really have to be in a fairly dark place to kind of see that faint ribbon of stars that says you're in the galaxy. And the trouble is, in the UK, we've kind of lost our ability to see the Milky Way. But there are these little oases of darkness that are around the country. Unfortunately, they happen to kind of reside under national parks and national landscapes. which means if you are in those areas when you step outside, it's likely that you'll see the Milky Way. And that's the reason really why South Downs and other protected landscapes are dark sky places and dark sky reserves, is because they're the last places where you can see the Milky Way. And it's great when you do the events that we do with the South Downs. It's going into the cities where you don't think people have a really good experience, but actually just being able to say you can walk 2 miles outside your door and go up to, you know, Ditchley Beacon from Brighton and have a look at the Milky Way, and people understand what they're looking at. So the Milky Way is a real key determinant of being under a dark sky, because it's that view that makes you connect with nature on that kind of cosmological scale that you don't get from any other view. And that's why it's important to protect, because it's you know, people have a lot of emotional experiences looking at the Milky Way, and they question why they're here, what they're going to do with their life, and all those things. So it's a very reflective surface, as you can kind of say, and that's why it's very important to protect it.
So there was something about that experience that when you came to South Downs and started thinking about protecting the night skies, that was part of what you wanted to protect, this view of the Milky Way, and that experience that you'd had as a teenager. Yeah, no,
that's right. I mean, it always puts a smile on your face when you see the Milky Way, and it's like seeing it again from the very first time. So I thought it was important that we, as a park, tried to do our bit and protect the night sky. And it was, you know, doing the first couple of months, I thought I needed to just make sure that I saw the Milky Way again, in this time in an appropriate 90s or 2000s clothing, and not the hideous luminous stuff that I was wearing all those years ago.
That's fantastic. So how did you go about starting this process of protecting the night sky?
Well, it was a long journey. So we initially kind of looked at, followed the example of Exmoor at the time, and I think Galloway, which was the first dark sky park. And we thought, well, let's see if we can do that. So whilst I was a lowly ranger in the national park, I don't even think I was that. I might have been an assistant volunteer coordinator at the time. We started looking at dark skies. So we just literally took a step outside of Queen Elizabeth Country Park. We bought the little device, the sky quality meter that you have to do to measure the sky quality, and we saw dark skies. And it was quite surprising from somebody who lives in Portsmouth, and I'm a bit of a city boy. So it was a bit of a surprise to see that we had those dark skies. So we thought, well, okay, let's expand that into a pilot project, and we mapped Hampshire with the help of some local astronomers in the area, and by that point it had kind of gone far enough that we thought, well, yeah, we'll keep going. We'll talk about the reserve, and we got the Dark Sky International involved, got them over to talk about our plans, and yeah, just carried on from there. Did all the bits to do that over the 3 years. I think it might have even been even longer to put the application together, but eventually we got there, and in 2016, I think it was, we got our award, and yeah, the rest is kind of history now. And we're getting close to our 10th anniversary, which is great. But it was a big process. It was a lot of work, but it was all worth it, because it's great that you're doing it and you're carrying it on. And dark skies is still important for the South Downs, and with the partners and with our organisations that we talk to, and with the residents and visitors. So long may it continue.
Great. So what are you actually measuring when you're trying to set up the dark sky place? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so what we kind of want to make sure is people can see the Milky Way. We'd use something called a sky quality meter, and it's a little gizmo, little device that basically you point up into the sky at night when there is no moon, no clouds. So you can imagine how many years in the UK we get of that. Not many. And you press a little button, and it gives you a number that relates to the brightness of the sky, and that number, just again, because it's related to brightness, is also related to darkness. And the higher that number, the darker it is, and the more stars you can see. So the magic number for that is around 20.5, and it's measured in magnitudes per arc second squared, which is a fancy way. Yeah, it's very technical, but it's just a fancy way of saying brightness of an area of the sky.
Okay.
And yeah, 20.5 is the point where my eyes could roughly see the Milky Way. That'll get worse as I get older, unfortunately. Now I've turned 50. Yeah, so any point above that was worth protecting. And South Downs had quite a lot of areas where we reached that threshold. So that's what you see on the Dark Skies map and the zoning we employed. was those areas where you could realistically see the Milky Way. So that little tiny device did the trick, but you can do it with your own eyes. This is a great time to go out and to see Orion. And if you count the number of stars in Orion from his shoulders to his feet, roughly around about 25 stars. That's probably about the same kind of sky brightness you will get for our dark sky. So if people want to do their own citizen science, go out and have a look at Orion. Nice easy constellation to spot.
It's like a big H, isn't it?
So, yeah, big H with a little dangly thing between his legs, which is his sword.
Yes,
isn't it?
It is his sword. Yeah, definitely. And what prevents the skies being dark?
Well, a couple of things really. I mean, the main one's light pollution or artificial light at night, and that's just a sign of development. It's where people have cities and they have towns and they have pastimes they want to do in the evening. All that needs light, and it's just that stray light, good and bad, that makes its way into the atmosphere, and that light scatters off of all the components of the atmosphere. So you get water vapor, but you also get the pollutants as well. So it's the same kind of physics as makes the sky blue, but unfortunately makes our sky orange at the moment. And that's where we lose our dark skies, because it's just really the scattering of light from artificial light that's pervading the view. But we've now got other problems. Like I said, we've got the pollution problem. So the aerosols that come from cars and cities and things like that has an impact. Water vapor, that has another impact. But also now the satellites that are coming over our skies, they're getting worse and worse and worse. So Elon Musk's Starlink, unfortunately, is while it doesn't brighten the sky, it's very annoying for people to see that kind of artificiality in the atmosphere.
So there's an activism component to protecting our dark. Well, obviously with the protection and to preventing or improving light pollution. What would you say are the main things that maybe someone could do as an individual with their home? What might people want to look at in terms of if they wanted to reduce their light pollution?
I mean, that's a great thing to do for people to get involved, because what they will do, the same things I'm going to suggest are the same things that professional lighting designers use, and it's the basic advice that Dark Sky International give out, which are the 5 main fundamental points of lighting. So the first one is to make sure that it's justified. So if you do need LED light, make sure it's got a purpose and it's doing something useful. So maybe avoid architectural or decorative lighting that just makes your house look pretty but you never see it because you're inside. The second thing we want to do is make sure that the light is pointing downward. So tilt all your lights so the light shines down on the ground and it doesn't go up into the sky. The third one is making sure we've got the right level of right light levels. So that's making sure we don't buy the brightest lights off the shelves to light your garden path or cook a sausage in the barbecue, because all that does, even if you have got it pointing down, just creates more scatter. If you don't get the light levels right, you actually can kind of like really annoy your neighbours as well. The fourth one to do is to look at the actual colour of the light, and what we now know is that the blue and white, harsh white wavelengths of LED light actually scatters more within the atmosphere and it penetrates further into the sky. So that makes sky glow, which is the orange glow above cities, much worse. So by using warmer colour temperatures, so things like to get technical, we look at 3000 Kelvin, which is now usually printed on the box of lamps. Anything lower than 3000 is great, but you can go much lower to 2200, and that's really good for wildlife, particularly for back gardens and things like that. And the last thing you do is just make sure you've got the right kind of controls on it, so proximity sensors, turning it off at night, and it's those kind of 5 things, and they all are in order of impact. So if you want to do the first thing, just have a check to see what your light is doing, but the best way to sum it up is the right light in the right place at the right time with the right controls. And that's fundamental lighting 101 that you can apply at your light outside your house to Wembley Stadium. It's the same principles, but I'm sure you could do a much better job than Wembley Stadium.
Right, so let's see if I've got this. So you want to make sure that you actually need a light, in the first place.
Yeah.
And then Remind me.
It's lighting pointing down.
Lighting pointing down,
Yep.
so that it's not going upwards or outwards. You
Yep.
just want it downwards. Okay, and the third thing
Was the right kind of light levels.
the right light level, so not necessarily too bright. You just want to think about
Yeah.
just enough that you can, so that you can see what you need to see.
Yeah, and about 500 lumens is what we recommend for domestic purposes, which is roughly equivalent to an old kind of 65 watt bulb.
Okay.
So it's enough to get down the garden path. What you see these days is you see people buy security lights that are often around about 2,000 lumens. But that's the same operating power as one of the street lights you get at 5 metre installed. So actually, you know, you can put effectively a street light in your back garden, which if the council did that, you'd probably complain about it.
Yeah, so that also affects, what do they call it, light trespass, don't they?
Exactly,
When it
yeah,
goes into
yeah.
neighbours'
Yeah.
gardens and houses. So that was the third thing. The fourth thing
Colour
was the
temperature.
colour temperature. So towards the warmer, you want a nice warm white light,
Yeah.
ideally 3000 Kelvin or below if you want to look at what's written on the box.
Yep.
And the fifth thing is to have the right controls on it. You don't have it on all the time. It might have a proximity sensor.
That's
So
exactly
great.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're obviously at Queen Elizabeth Country Park, and one of the reasons why we've come here is because it's not far from Butser Hill, which is one of our dark sky discovery sites. So the whole South Downs National Park is designated as a dark sky place, an international dark sky reserve. But we also have these particular 10 points across the park that are called dark sky discovery sites. So tell us a bit about them.
Yeah, well, they're great little areas where you can just go around and safely see the night sky. So they're all kind of based on car parks or areas that you can get to reasonably quickly. And they're just places where you can stand there relatively free of artificial light and get a decent view of the sky. And from a dark skies places point of view, they are probably the bottom rung of the ladder of what we can protect, but they're really good and accessible. And you'll see lots of these places across the UK where just people want to provide some kind of viewing place that gets a good view of the sky. And you actually find that a lot of them are done by astronomy groups, and there's places where they meet. So you might actually find when you do go to these places some weird people hanging around in car parks with telescopes, and they're always happy to talk about what they're doing. So yeah, I mean they're a really good thing to look at, and if you've got places in your area or car parks or village greens or fields that you think would serve as a good place where you can run events or just do talks, then have a look at the scheme. It is going through a bit of a reframe at the moment, so it's just slowed down a bit in terms of what they're doing, but it is going to get resurrected, and hopefully we'll get lots more dark sky discovery sites that people can just feel they're going to the right place to look at the stars.
Brilliant. Yeah, and particularly with all the action that's been happening in the skies recently with the aurora and the comet,
Yeah,
these are really
absolutely.
great sites to go to see those kinds of things, I would imagine. Yeah. So we've got 10 across the park, haven't we? There's where does they start? Winchester Science
yeah.
Centre,
Well,
and
they're testing
then
out, aren't they, where they all are.
yeah. Well, they're all on the website.
They're all, yeah.
And there's lots of information on the South Downs website around the dark skies, and lots of information around the there's maps of where the dark sky discovery sites are, and there are also videos, so you get a really nice feel before you go of what these dark sky discovery sites are like.
Yeah.
So we're designated as an international dark sky reserve. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make much sense, really, does it? I mean, unless you kind of understand what the point is. So, one of my other roles is I do a bit of work for Dark Sky International, and I'm the chairman of the Dark Sky Places Committee. So, I do get involved in looking at lots of different applications from around the world to get them to be approved as dark sky places. And at the moment, we have a number of different designation options that different places can apply for. So, we are a reserve. And that means it's kind of one of these complicated mixed landscapes that has communities in it, that is a certain size. It has a core area of darkness that we try to protect, and we do that with positive lighting changes from the local lighting authorities. But there is also other schemes such as the parks, and you would think that why didn't the South Downs National Park go for a park? Well, that's a good question, because Northumberland did that, but really it's about how they are managed, and parks tend to be like the US National Park Service. They are kind of like a visitor status, a flag and a ranger with a hat on. Whereas ours are partnership led, they're much more difficult. So there's really the distinction, but the actions to protect them are very, very similar. Then we have communities. Communities can adopt their own policies and ordinance that are Dark Sky approved, and they can get some award there. Then you've got sanctuaries. Sanctuaries are very dark places, but they are more not necessarily there to be higher, a better quality than parks and reserves, but just a different way of managing a landscape. So with sanctuaries, there's not many people to do education and outreach, so they're just another option for some places that just don't have the capability to kind of promote dark skies in the way that National South Downs can, because you're there as the dark sky officer promoting than they had me before. So there's a good resources that go on with that, and sanctuaries don't have that. And the last one is urban night sky places. And these are very similar to dark sky discovery sites, except they are just a one higher level up the ladder in that they ask for just more information on the controls of lighting in the area, a lighting management plan, an inventory. And that's kind of like the fundamental part of all the categories, is a lighting management plan built up by a policy. And that's where the South Downs really has done really well in formulating the South Downs technical advice note and the policies that were in the local plan, because they've been copied virtually everywhere else in the UK. So it's great that we were able to set that bar nice and high, and we're still managing to use it.
So that's all part of our planning authority work as well, isn't it? I think our case officers use that technical advice note to look at the different plans. They
do. So every new development that has a lighting impact should follow the lighting technical advice note, and that technical advice note is based on those 5 principles. So it's a long document, but it's essentially very, very simple. And
that's absolutely how we can, as a national park and as a planning authority, can support preventing light pollution or protecting the skies against light pollution. Is through those policies and ordinance that we have access to.
And it's great because the South Downs one really worked very well, is you're finding that kind of template being copied by local authorities that aren't protected areas, and they just want to get involved. Their residents want to do something about their rural skies, even though they're not protected. So it's protecting all of the UK skies, which is great. We need to see more local authorities to do it, really.
Okay, so again, that's maybe something people can think about how they might want to talk to their local authorities.
Get them to do something.
So a bit more activism to go on there. Yeah, fantastic. So we're designated an international dark sky reserve. So what's this international bit about?
Well, we're part of a very, very good club. So I think there's only about 20 or so reserves in the world. We might have a few more of that coming through the pipeline at the moment, but there's not many. We've actually got more than 200 dark sky places worldwide, a growing family. And we're just part of a worldwide effort to reduce light pollution. And the applications that I see are wonderfully varied, and you can tell the passion of people who want to protect their skies. So we get a lot of national parks, obviously, from around the world, but we get some really surprising ones from little observatories in Australia to communities in New Zealand that want to do stuff with tourism, and we've got some really complex, interesting ones from places like Alula in Saudi Arabia, who were just designated with one of their parks, who are really keen to embed astrotourism as part of their whole kind of destination, or the kind of like the tourism package they do. So they can be very simple, which the first ones originally were, but we're now seeing they're getting very complicated, very wide-ranging, and we're looking as an organisation just to make sure that our new guidelines really start to look at protecting larger areas of the planet, because at the moment, whilst the activism is good, it's a very small space, comparatively speaking. So it's great working with these really big landscapes overseas, Oregon Outback was a great one, or Big Bend, that have got these much bigger areas that we can protect more of the surface area of the earth than we're doing at the moment.
Fantastic. And if you do want to get involved, Dark Sky International do have a great scheme, the Dark Sky Advocate Scheme. There's loads of information on their website about how, as individuals and as communities, you can get involved in all of this stuff.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you're an advocate as well.
I am an
I'm
advocate,
an advocate.
yeah.
We do this secret handshake.
Yes, shh, don't tell anyone.
Yeah, you get to learn that. Yeah, no, it's a great network, and again, it's lots of people worldwide who share stories and do the occasional conference and learn and just take the activities and the lessons that people have had and try and apply that in different places and just kind of move everything forward one step at a time in the dark.
Yes, and certainly the recent conference that I think we were both at online was really inspiring, just hearing about all those global efforts and people who really care about the dark skies for all sorts of different reasons, because obviously we've talked a bit about the stargazing aspect to it, but there's also nocturnal wildlife
absolutely
is hugely a part of the importance of dark skies.
I mean that's a very interesting point, because the dark sky movement originally kind of started as an astronomical exercise, but it's very niche, and it's very difficult to get policy change when you're trying to persuade ministers with quite techie astronomers who want to see the sky. But now we know that light pollution, because of the impacts it has, affects wildlife. I mean, they're animals, they have eyes, they like the dark, they grew up with the dark as well. It affects our mental health because it affects the something called the Dracula hormone, called melatonin, and that's it's a weird name, but it suppresses that hormone. Melatonin is really key in the way our body recovers at night. So when we sleep, our body creates melatonin, and it helps us relax, and it helps us repair. And if we suppress that, then we leave ourselves liable open to illnesses, things like that. But so you've got wildlife, you've got health and well-being, you've got cultural heritage, you've just got people's kind of personal connection to the night sky that's more sensory based, and you've also got that, probably one of the more important drivers is energy costs, and reducing the amount we spend on needlessly lighting the sky, but also important security, and we're seeing a bit of a tussle with that at the moment. We're seeing some councils reducing the light pollution by turning the lights off at night, but we've got some councils that actually want to see them left on because of the I don't want to use the word perception too much, but they've got valid reasons for wanting to keep the lights on, to keep people feeling that they're safe, and that's a valid argument. And I don't think anybody in the dark skies movement would say keeping people safe wasn't as important, if not more important, than looking at the sky, because that lighting and crime do go together. There's no evidence to say that lighting causes crime or solves crime, but we have that perception of it. So light pollution, it goes through many different things, but from the South Downs point of view, protecting our night sky is conserving and enhancing all the lovely critters and the weird things that crawl up and moo at you in the night when you can't see them and scare the living bejesus out of you. So they're great little things like that, and so it's all good for them as well. Nocturnal wildlife, health and well-being, you mentioned. So what should we be looking out for in the skies at the moment? Now, unfortunately, it's a bit cloudy tonight. It is a bit cloudy.
If it was clear, what would you be looking out for?
What would I be looking? Well, we've got some great planets up at the moment, actually. So we did that event, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago?
We did, yeah.
Well, we got some brilliant views of Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn's rings are a little bit not quite as oblique as they normally are, but still amazing to see, and they're the brightest things you can see in the sky. I think Venus is up at the minute.
Venus is up, yes, yeah.
So Venus is not the brightest star, but it's the brightest object in the sky. It's nice white bright light. I think Jupiter might be a bit low down now, isn't it? I think was it coming up?
Yeah, it's still pretty, it's heading towards its brightest.
I haven't checked. It's been so cloudy, I haven't really had to check.
Yes.
But they're up there. So if you can get a pair of binoculars, start with a planet, start with those really bright objects. They're really good. Then after that, I mean, you can then start to go constellation hopping. Orion is the best place to start because it's really obvious. It's like I said, it's that big H in the sky. And from Orion, you can kind of go across the next one across, which is Taurus the bull, which looks like a big V in the sky. But just in the constellation of Taurus, you've got the lovely little cluster of stars called the Pleiades. And I was at a conference last week, and I was talking to one of my Commission for Dark Skies members, and Megan, who is just gone worldwide doing some background for her book on all about dark skies. and she was talking about the way that different communities have spoken about the Pleiades, and the way that they feature in all their cultural heritage narratives, and the way it means different things to different people. So for the Greeks, it was Taurus the bull, and the Pleiades are the kind of like the shoulder of the bull. But in different societies, they meant different things, and the rising of the Pleiades coincided with harvests and things like that, and different kind of events in societies. So that's not a bad one to start at, and that's a pretty little one to go through with binoculars as well. What would you look at? What's your favourite?
Well, I was going to say, because the Pleiades, it's a great link with the Seven Sisters, which is over at the eastern end of the national park. And I was doing a bit of research recently, and the Pleiades are around 75 to 100 million years old. They're a cluster of very young, it probably doesn't sound young, but yeah, a few million years old is pretty young for stars. And of course the Seven Sisters chalk cliffs are between 85, 87 million years old. So they're about the same age, which I always think is a really lovely connection. The chalk cliffs of the Seven Sisters and the stars of the Seven Sisters are, within a few million years.
Yeah, that's
similar
astronomically
sort of
speaking.
Yeah, astronomically speaking. Waving your hands to the power of 10.
Yeah. Power of 10 between friends, nothing.
yeah. No, I mean, I always love looking at Orion, and particularly in his sword, you've got a nice nebula there, which is always great to look at through binoculars. And it's just incredible when you do look through binoculars, just how many more stars you can see on a nice clear night.
I mean, Cygnus is a good target for that, isn't it? Because it's right above the head. It looks like what it's supposed to. Cygnus, a swan, because it's got that lovely kind of like coat hanger triangle with the neck. But the Milky Way goes straight through the bird, because Cygnus has always been flying along the Milky Way. So if you do have binoculars, straight up in the air, have a look at that, and then amaze yourself.
And what about apps? What would you use? Any apps?
Apps, yeah. So I mean, there's quite a lot of good ones. There's, I think, Spacewalk and Star Walk, or lots of combinations between Star and Walk and Space that are on there that are useful. If you want to be a bit more techie, then you can go to Stellarium, which is a free app that you can use on the phone, but I would definitely download it on your laptop, because it's like a really good user-friendly planetarium software. That's just stunning. You can, if you get really into it, you can hook it up to a telescope and all those things, but it really does show you the sky at any point in time, any point in the universe. You can go back and see the actual Star of Bethlehem if you rewind it all the way back and put the right kind of location values on it. So I'd suggest Stellarium was a really good one. And then you've got some other ones. I've got Mobile Observatory, which I had to pay for because I needed to know when twilight was, because that's when I'm going to have to take sky quality values. So I have to pay for a little bit more for mine. But there are a lot out there. But, you know, as we know from events, you only need to know a few things, what you're looking at, to really understand the sky. So, you know, Wikipedia is always good for just understanding the basics about what you're looking at, really, isn't it? So between those apps and a good couple of books, and even YouTube videos, there are basics on that, or even the BBC, Brian Cox's stuff, really good. But I think if you really want to learn about that hands-on or kind of theatrical experience, head down to the South Downs Planetarium in Chichester and take in one of their shows, because it's a proper old school projector. And our partners there, Dr. John Mason, he will do a fantastic about an hour-long show of the sky and what you're going to see, and it's brilliant.
And you sometimes work there as well?
I do. I don't do it so much anymore. I'm a bit busy, but I help with the schools. But I do quite enjoy it. It's very techy, and it's like being on the bridge of an old Starship Enterprise with all the controls, and I do quite like it. I don't do enough of it, but there we go. Still at work.
Well, that's fantastic. So, Dan, I just want to say thank you so very much for coming along.
It's all right.
Yeah, we've covered the amazing memory that you have of seeing the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And really,
what was yours?
It was also Milky Way.
Milky Way.
Yeah,
where were you?
Yeah, I was in rural Wiltshire.
That's what you were.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Which was really special to hear about these memories. So, yeah, have a think about your memories. When you've been out seeing the night sky, and if you don't have a memory, come along and explore the South Downs National Park at night. Have a look on our website. We also have the annual Dark Skies Festival, which is usually in February around the half term, so we'll have that coming up as well, so keep an eye on the website for that. And then so we just talked a bit about activism, and there's lots of information about that on our website as well, but also check out Dark Sky International. And get some apps, get outdoors, And what's the phrase that you came up with?
Embrace the darkness.
Embrace the darkness.
Should have trademarked it.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening, and we look forward to speaking with you next time. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Embrace the Darkness, presented by me, Elinor Newman. The podcast is recorded and produced by the South Downs National Park Authority from the South Downs International Dark Sky Reserve. Music is by Orbit DoD, direct from Upbeat. To find out more about the South Downs International Dark Sky Reserve, including the best places to stargaze, go to www.southdowns.gov.uk/dark skies. If you have a comment, suggestion, or any other thoughts, we would love to hear them. You can contact us on embracethedarkness@southdowns.gov.uk. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a rating or a review. And until next time, embrace the darkness.